There are a lot of iconic superheroes in the world of comics, but there are very few superhero accessories that are as iconic as the Batmobile. It's one of the most well-known cars in all of popular culture, and it's pretty much a required addition to any Batman adaptation. Much like how we all have our favorite Batman actors, we all have our favorite design for the Batmobile. Maybe you're more of a fan of the classic 60s look. Maybe you're more into the militaristic tank design of the Christopher Nolan movies. Maybe you just can't accept any Batmobile design that isn't the dragster look from the animated series. But regardless of your taste, there's no denying that the Batmobile is one of the most iconic elements of Batman's mythology. Maybe the most iconic. It's almost a character in and of itself, one of the greatest comic book characters of all time even. It's just odd that it was never really defined by its medium of origin. When director Matt Reeves showed off the first look of the Batmobile from his upcoming Batman movie, many fans were a bit disappointed in the reveal. It didn't look like any of the previous Batmobile designs from previous films. It honestly just looked like a car. I can see why this might upset some people. Previous on-screen Batmobiles have had a whole host of really creative and even wacky designs to them, ranging from the very impractical to a military vehicle. The Batmobile of Tim Burton's Batman movies was a very elegant Art Deco roadster. The Batmobiles of Joel Schumacher's films, on the other hand, were very sleek, flashy, and colorful in nature, more so than Burton's vehicle. Again, the Christopher Nolan movies went for a more militaristic look with its Batmobile, officially known as the Tumbler. It's often been described as a mix between a Lamborghini and a tank. And the Zack Snyder era Batmobile was sort of this mix of the two different styles, sleek, but very armored and tank-like as well. But this Batmobile, the one that Robert Pattinson will be driving, really does look like a traditional street-legal car. Sure, it has a souped-up engine in the back, complete with a trademark afterburner, but really, it looks like it could fit well into something like the Fast and the Furious universe, more so than a traditional Batman universe. It looks more along the lines of a Ford Mustang or a Dodge Challenger or something like that. And I'm sure it's at this point that detractors of this look are crying foul about how unfaithful it is to the source material, how the Batmobile really should be this big, flashy affair with a really unique design and a personality all its own. And fins on the back of it. That's a really big sticking point for a lot of people. Well, actually, no. Not really, at least. The Batmobile of the comics has never really been a defining aspect of the character or his world. Now, yes, of course, the Batmobile has been around since the very beginning. It debuted in 1939 in the pages of Detective Comics 27, along with Batman himself, Bruce Wayne, and Commissioner Gordon. It was in the very first issue with the very first appearance of Batman. And it looked like this.
That's the car? It's not like a stunt car or anything, is it?
Doesn't need to be a stunt car.
What kind of car is it?
It's a red car.
It's just a red car. There's nothing unique or distinguishing about it. In fact, there's all the evidence to suggest that not only is this Batman's car, but Bruce Wayne's car as well. For a guy so concerned about privacy and secrecy, having your main car pull double duty like that is a very silly thing to do. In fact, the term Batmobile wouldn't appear in comics until 1941 in the pages of Detective Comics issue 48. A few months later, in Batman number 5, we finally got a design for a car where somebody can look at it and say, yes, that is a vehicle Batman would drive. This is that design. This design by Jerry Robinson pretty much became the default design for the Batmobile for many years afterwards. Sure, some artists would take their own liberties with the design, adding a few touches here and there, but overall, this was it. This was the Batmobile. Things would more or less remain the same up until the mid to late 60s. Around this time, comic book artists started to incorporate elements from the 1966 Batmobile seen in the TV show starring Adam West into the design of the comic book Batmobile. And this sort of created what we now think of as the classic Batmobile look. But a funny thing happened around the time the 1970s rolled around. Writers and artists like Dennis O'Neil, Neil Adams, Irv Novak, and many others wanted to take Batman in a more grounded direction, portray him more as a street-level vigilante rather than this happy-go-lucky, galaxy-spanning superhero that he sort of became. This meant that pretty much every aspect of the Batman mythology needed a makeover, including the Batmobile. It needed to be something a lot less flashy and a lot more subtle. So they decided to go with the design of a regular ass car again. Blue this time. Different artists would play with the shape and size of the vehicle, but overall, this was it. This was the design of the Batmobile for all of the 70s and most of the 80s. The tire that Jason Todd steals off the Batmobile was stolen from a car that pretty much looks like this. Sure, there were exceptions like the Dark Knight Returns and the big Batmobile tank, but again, that was the exception rather than the rule. The comics wouldn't really go back to a more stylized look for the Batmobile until after 1989. After the success of Tim Burton's first Batman movie, DC decided to revamp Batman's universe again to be more in line with that of the film. That means Gotham City got a makeover, the overall tone of the books got a little bit more darker and serious, and of course, the Batmobile got a visual overhaul. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. Although the Batmobile debuted in comics, comics never really defined the Batmobile. It's been defined by its appearances in movies and TV shows. In the comics, the Batmobile was really just another tool in Batman's arsenal. In the movies, it becomes a character all its own. I mean, think about it. Every time the Batmobile first appears in one of these films, it's an event. It's a big ass reveal that's supposed to be a surprise for the audience, even though we know the Batmobile's gonna be in the movie.
Get in the car.
I gotta get me one of those.
Now, of course, that's not to say there haven't been good or even great Batmobile designs in the comics. There, of course, have been. It's just that the comics never really put as much emphasis into the car as the movies have. After the movies made the car so iconic, it was only natural for the comics to follow suit in their own way. After 1989, you started to see a whole host of Batmobile designs ranging from the subtle to the very intricate, from the grounded to the grotesque, from whatever weird stuff Norm Brayfogle was doing to people who were pretty much just copying the design of the movie and TV show Batmobiles. Now, admittedly, I'm sure marketing had a very big hand in this decision. I mean, after all, a plain blue card isn't really the best choice for a toy or other piece of merchandise. Sure, that may not have been a big concern back in the 70s and 80s, but in a post-Star Wars world, this was big business. That's not to say that there wasn't Batmobile merchandise back then, but whatever Batmobile merchandise there was never really used the comic book look. It always used the look from the Batman '66 show. The George Barris design was the first time many people were seeing what a superhero's vehicle could and should look like. At a time when the comics were going more grounded, the show was going big and flashy, and that resonated with people. Even though the 1966 Batmobile was based on a real car, a 1955 Lincoln Futura prototype, it was striking and unique enough to catch people's eye. It was unquestionably Batman's car. Now onto this new car, the one that Robert Pattinson will be driving. When I first saw it, I instantly thought of the 70s era Batmobile. It's not the flashiest or the most flamboyant, but this car's sleek, subtle, almost average look makes it the perfect vehicle for a more down-to-earth take on Batman. That's not to say that this car doesn't have traditional Batmobile touches to it. It does. It does have an afterburner engine, which is of course standard on all movie Batmobiles, and it does have fins, bringing that motif back to the big screen for the first time in a long time. And I'm sure that this car is going to have a trick or two up its sleeve that they're saving for the actual movie. But what's important, at least to me, is that the overall design of this car really does seem to signify the direction that they're taking this film. This isn't necessarily going to be a big bombastic movie, rather it looks to be a much smaller, more intimate affair. Much more of a detective story rather than a traditional superhero epic. Of course, that's not to say there won't be an explosion or two in this movie. Of course there's gonna be, but Matt Reeves has already said that he wants this film to be a more noir-driven detective story. And movies like that don't really lend themselves too well to the traditional grandiose style of superhero films. So a design like this makes a lot more sense for the film's intended overall style. And honestly, I like it a lot. It's different, sure, but it's still powerful and imposing like a Batmobile should be. I can definitely see a Batman driving around in a car like this. In fact, I think it's a nice callback to an era of the comics when they were trying to emphasize more noir style detective stories rather than the traditional grandiose superhero stories. Do I miss the more outlandish designs of Batmobiles past? Well, sure I do in some respect, but at the same time, what better way to differentiate yourself from previous Batmobiles and Batman movies than by going in the complete opposite direction? This Batmobile seems to fit right in line with the design aesthetic of the Batsuit, which we saw a few weeks ago, and even the Batcycle that we've seen in leaked set photos recently. This seems to be a Batman that is trying to work with what he has around him and cobbles together pieces of what's nearby to create his suit, his car, his cycle, and whatever else he has to use, rather than traditional Batman stories where he's got the costume, the car, and whatnot right out of the gate, and he's pretty much fully formed from the beginning. This is a Batman who's young in his career and is evolving over time, and his toys reflect that. I can dig it. Then I will definitely be buying a Hot Wheels of this Batmobile when it comes out. But of course, what do you think of this new Batmobile? Are you digging it, or do you think it can use a little bit more of that traditional Batmobile pizzazz? Let me know down below or anywhere on the internet. Now, I obviously didn't talk about every Batmobile ever. There is not enough time in the world to do that. But a lot of the information I got from this episode came from Batmobilehistory.com. And I will put a link to that website in the description for you to check out if you want to know more about really any Batmobile. It's the most comprehensive Batmobile encyclopedia on the internet or anywhere really. It's good stuff. And again, for the record, there are great Batmobile designs in the comics. This J.H. Williams design is really rad. David Finch has done a lot of really good Batmobiles. I do like the Jerry Robinson design for the Batmobile. The one from the Children of Dreams manga is really cool. And pretty much anytime Sean Gordon Murphy draws the Batmobile, it's poster worthy. I wanted to put some Amazon affiliate links in the description to some really cool Batman toys, but I couldn't pick just one, so I put an Amazon affiliate link to all the Batmobile stuff on Amazon. Pick whatever one you want. It doesn't matter because the Batmobile is just a great toy all around. No matter which one you pick, you'll enjoy yourself. Of course, I left most of my Batmobiles back at my parents' house. I don't really have a whole lot here. I have these two. Based on the Burton design, obviously. And this one I got from McDonald's many moons ago. It's not an official Batmobile, but it looks like it could be. And of course, don't forget that we have new videos on this channel every single Tuesday and Wednesday, with Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern being Wulff Den Live. So subscribe to see all of that, like this video, and share it with a friend who doesn't understand why this new Batmobile just looks kind of basic. Show them this video and maybe they'll see that there is precedent for a Batmobile like this. Or not, maybe they'll just get even madder. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.